All right, so I recently had an issue where I got into the car, pressed the start button, and all I heard was a single loud click coming from the starter, which you can see over here. And typically a single loud click from the starter means your starter's toast. I've replaced the starter on almost every one of my vehicles, and that's pretty much the largest indicating symptom of a bad starter. The battery had proper voltage. Even using my battery charger on the jump setting wouldn't start it, so I knew it wasn't a voltage and amperage issue. So it further continued to suggest that the starter was bad, because the relay was good because it was sending signal to the starter, otherwise the starter wouldn't click. After reading through some forums and talking to my parts guy at the local indie parts shop, everything's pretty much confirmed that suspicion that the starter was bad. So I ordered the new starter, which Volvo is very proud of, $400. Put it in there, and same thing, just a single click. So then I'm officially stumped. I'm thinking that the maybe the flywheel or the crank is seized. So I go over here to the front of the engine, put the 15mm wrench on the end of the crank, spin. I hear the flywheel engage with the teeth of the starter, so I know it's working free. Try to start it again, single click, no dice. So electrical issues are the only thing that are lingering. Obviously voltage was being supplied to the starter, but perhaps not enough amperage. And why would that be? So with not being able to find anything else regarding other things it could be for getting that loud single click, I just got the multimeter out and started going to town with the electronics, and I found something very interesting. There is a cable that comes off of the battery, and that cable runs directly to the starter. And when testing for continuity between this tab, and I noticed that there's this brown plastic piece right here, I have no continuity between these, okay? I've got, continuity over here, as you could see, continuity between the cable and this pad, but then I have nothing here. So I pry this brown plastic piece off, and I see that there is basically a fuse right here, and it's got a hairline fracture between it. I don't know what amperage this fuse is for. Based on my previous cars, which were older, I did not know that they even made inline fuses with battery cables. So obviously this is here to prevent too much amperage being pulled to the starter. I don't know if that's to save the starter, which now I obviously have a brand new starter in the car, which I don't. So I have an old starter, which is still in good condition. Maybe it was pulling too much amperage, and that's why this fuse broke. I have gone and picked up the new fuse, which is basically this portion of the cable with about 1/8 of lead, and you splice it to the original cable. And that's what I'm gonna do to get things up and running, because I confirmed that this is the issue as well, because I put a jumper clamp on the cable itself, jumped it directly to the battery terminal, and the car started up just fine. So we're gonna go ahead and get that spliced, and my car will be fixed. Now, because this is what looks to be close to 2-gauge cable, I don't have the room or the tooling to clamp a 2-gauge butt splice connector while it's on the car. I'm gonna have to use my vise. So I'm just gonna go ahead and remove the whole cable. It basically runs straight from the battery all the way to the main starter lead down here. So I'm just gonna pull the whole cable out of the car, bring it into the garage, use my vise to crimp the butt splice on the new cable, so that way I make sure I have a good connection. There's also some heat shrink tubing included in the part kit, and I don't want to bring a heat gun near a lot of other hoses if I don't need to, especially, you know, these like small vacuum hoses. If any of you are curious about what it takes to get this starter out, you don't really have to remove a lot. You gotta wrestle around a lot with the various coolant hoses and stuff, but all it takes is a 13 millimeter and an 8 millimeter wrench and socket to get you through. Basically, there's 3 bolts holding the starter on. There's 2 up top, this one, and that one back there. You're going to take these nuts off first that hold this little bracket, and then you'll be able to access the 13 millimeter bolt behind it. These bolts have a threaded post on the end of them. All 3 do, so they're all the same. And then there's the 3rd one right down there. So you get those 3 bolts out, and then there's 1/4 bolt that you cannot access from above. It is on the bottom of the starter housing. If you drop the belly pan from the bottom of the car, you'll be able to see it from the bottom. You need an 8 millimeter socket on a large extension, and you'll be able to take that out, and the starter will be loose. And then it's just a matter of wrestling it around all these cables, coolant hoses. I ended up popping the clip out of this intake hose that goes to the throttle body and moving that over, and it was all I needed was another 1/4 of an inch, and it helped me get the rear of it past it. Putting the new one in went a lot more smoothly because I had gravity working with me, and it just kind of, you know, fumbled its way through the cables, and I was able to bolt it up. Let's go ahead and get this rest of this cable off and see if I can't wrestle it out of the bottom of the battery box. All right, to get the cable away from the battery box, I ended up just slicing through this little rubber grommet that snugs up into the corner of the battery box. There is no way to get the cable through this unless I wanted to pull this cable too, and I'm not going through that. So I just cut through it. I'll use some electrical tape to bind it back up before I shove it back into place. But the cable is out, and you can see the new, what they call just the fuse. And there goes my butt splice on the ground. But you can see here's the new fuse. They give you about, you know, 8 inches or so of lead on it, so you can go ahead and splice it onto the new cable. Hopefully there isn't an underlying issue and this fuse doesn't blow as soon as I start driving the car for a week. Yeah, let's take this in the garage and get these leads cut, find my butt splice on the driveway wherever it fell, and we'll get to it. typically don't have to cut all the way through with this stuff. I like to cut just a little shy, and you could usually just peel it off, so that way you don't accidentally start cutting off threads. See, I didn't cut off any there. All right, and I'm just at the right spot there. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this off. Now I'm undecided on whether I want to, there's a trick when you don't have a crimp tool to basically tape a nail to your splice and then put that in a vise and crimp it down. But I'm on the fence between that or using a hammer and a punch to put a crimp in here. And I'm kind of leaning on the hammer and punch for this size of a splice. I mean, either way, I just need to make a ton of friction here on the splice. So, you know, I think I might vise. I might vise it. All right. Let's go ahead and get a bigger Allen key here. Or a bigger bolt. Got some spare stuff laying around. Don't really have large gauge cutters, so I'm gonna have to cut this a little bit at a time. I could get large gauge cutters if I wanted to spend, you know, 35, 40 bucks for this one job. This one time I've had to use some large gauge cutters and large gauge crimpers, but you know what? For this one time, I think I'll be all right. With some sufficient hacking, some DIY method. The goal of a splice like this, a non-soldered splice, is to just create a ton of friction in that connector. Enough friction to where these leads cannot pull apart and won't have significant voltage, amperage loss. And with how large this cable is, I think it's going to be just fine. is much more hardened because it's been sitting in a hot engine bay for years. There we go. Give it a little bit of a twist. Get it in there. Pull this sheath back a little bit more. Oh, I almost forgot. My heat shrink. That's flattened. I'm going to go ahead and hit this side again just to apply a little bit more force. Couldn't do it before as I didn't want to flatten out this side before I can get the cable in it. All right, we got a lot of pounds of force on that crimp. And it's holding strong. So let's go ahead and shrink this up. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this sheath over it a little bit, just for a little added structure. And let's go ahead and shrink this on. My big heat gun crapped out on me a few weeks ago. So hopefully my little hobby heat gun can take care of this. All right, I think that's gonna get it good enough. I just wanna make sure that the ends are tight. If anything, if I've got gaps in here, that's not as big a deal. I just wanna make sure I could seal this joint out from the elements. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap these ends in some electrical tape once it cools down a little bit, and then we'll be ready to install it back into the car.
All right, I got the cable installed again. Process of installation was I went ahead and bolted this end down first. There's this little plastic casing that snaps on and snaps off pretty easily that you'll be switching out with that. This clamp could be one of the biggest pains in this project because of the way this little 8mm bolt, it's just a tight clearance is all. I held this together with a clamp while I fed the bolt with the other hand, because to apply tension with one hand and try to feed with the other, it was just too tough. Got everything zip tied. You're going to lose a few of those like post zip ties. You know, those, you see them all over the engine compartment, black posts with the zip tie built in. You could salvage a couple of them, but you're probably gonna lose the rest. Went ahead and got the rubber bushing sorted out, and we are clamped up, ready to go. Let's go ahead and confirm that it turns over. Easy. All right, so project completed.